She is not my biological child. She has been lying to this family for years, my mother said, and the whole living room went still except for the cheap silver tinsel brushing against the heat vent. She said it on Christmas morning in front of 32 people, and by the second week of January, I had lost my job at a pediatric dental office, been removed from the church nursery list, and watched my boyfriend's mother tell him I was not stable enough to build a future with. My mother did not stop at humiliating me in public. She emailed my manager, called my landlord, and fed the same lie to anyone with a clipboard, a church title, or a little local authority. Then a woman I had never met walked into a room in Knox County and read one sentence out loud from a hospital record, and my mother's whole version of my life collapsed in under 10 seconds. My name is Brittany Elaine Mercer. I am 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Powell, Tennessee on Monday, December 25th, 2023. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. The Christmas gathering was at my parents' split-level house on Wexford Drive, the one with the sagging deck steps and the nativity scene my mother insisted on placing directly under the front window every December. My younger cousin Haley turned 19 that week, so my aunt had brought a sheet cake from Magpie's Bakery with buttercream poinsettias around the edges, and somehow Christmas breakfast had slid into a birthday thing by 11:15 in the morning. The house smelled like maple sausage, burnt cinnamon candles, and the lemon furniture polish my mother used on the dining table whenever she was expecting an audience. My mother, Denise Mercer, loved an audience. My father, Randall Mercer, stood near the stone fireplace with his coffee mug and did what he always did when she was getting ready to hurt somebody. He watched the room first, not her, the room. I had been back in my parents' house for 6 weeks by then, sleeping in my old bedroom with the mauve carpet and the closet door that still stuck in winter. The plan was temporary. In November, the pediatric dental office where I worked front desk had cut my hours from 34 a week to 12 after one of the hygienists came back from maternity leave. I was looking for another place, saving every paycheck, and trying not to let the embarrassment of being 24 and back at home settle into my bones. At 11:17, my Aunt Kendra handed Haley the cake knife. My little cousin Luke knocked over a Sprite. Someone laughed. My grandmother said, "Get a towel." The microwave over the stove beeped because my father had forgotten his second cup of coffee in there again. Then my mother clinked a spoon against her mug. That spoon sound is still in me, thin and bright, like a little glass warning bell. She smiled at Haley first. She always began with sweetness when she wanted to make cruelty look reasonable. "Before we do cake," she said, "I think honesty matters in a family, especially at Christmas." 32 people looked at her. I was standing near the end of the couch holding a paper plate with 2 sausage links and half a biscuit on it. My boyfriend Eli was next to the coat rack by the front door because there were no seats left. He gave me that quick sideways look people give when they know something is off, but have not understood how bad it is yet. My mother set her mug down on the side table. "Brittany is not my biological child," she said. "She has been lying to this family for years, and I am not going to let her keep deceiving people." You could hear the refrigerator motor kick on in the kitchen. My aunt said, "Denise?" My mother did not raise her voice. She never needed to. We took her in, we gave her a name, we gave her everything, and she has built her whole adult life on a false story. My father looked at the floor. I remember exactly how many seconds nobody moved. 7. I counted them later because that is what shock does. It turns you into a recorder. I said, "That is not true." That was all. My mother turned to the room, not to me. "There are things people should know if she is working around children and presenting herself as stable. She has been inventing a history that is not hers." That was the line that did the damage, not the biological part, though that was enough. The word stable, the phrase working around children. She knew exactly where to press. I worked reception at Smoky Ridge Pediatric Dentistry on Emory Place in Knoxville. I also volunteered in the church nursery twice a month at New Light Community on Clinton Highway. Half the people in that room either went to my church, knew someone who did, or knew somebody's cousin who took their kids to our office. My grandmother, Evelyn Stokes, spoke first. "Denise, stop this right now." My mother folded her hands. "No, I have kept this quiet for long enough." It was a lie so complete I almost admired how cleanly she delivered it. Because I was born at St. Anne's Women's Center in Knoxville on August 14th, 1999. My mother's name was on the records. I had seen the short form birth certificate before. We all had. But in that room, on Christmas morning, with my father saying nothing, and my mother speaking like she was doing a painful but noble thing, it landed differently. People did not know what they knew anymore. That is how fast reputation changes shape. One sentence, one room, 7 seconds. Eli said, "Brittany, let's go." My mother said that would be easiest, yes, not loud, not dramatic, just trimmed cleanly like she was cutting thread. I put the plate down on the coffee table and got my coat. My hands were steady. That part always surprises people. I did not scream, I did not cry in the room. Instead, I looked around once and saw who would not meet my eyes. My cousin Jenna stared at her lap. My Aunt Kendra looked furious, but stayed still. My father took a sip of coffee that had gone cold, and Mrs. Colleen Barker, our church child care coordinator, was standing by the tree with a gift bag in one hand, watching me like I had suddenly become paperwork. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change and nobody else in the room has decided whether you're worth defending, you know how cold the body gets. Not the shaking kind, the hollow kind. And what happened over the next 19 days was worse than the Christmas scene itself, because humiliation does not stay in the room where it starts. Eli drove me to the Weigels on Western Avenue because I did not want to go to a friend's house crying and I did not want him taking me back there yet. We sat in his gray 2014 Honda Civic with the heater ticking and the smell of old coffee in the cup holder. He kept saying, "This makes no sense," and I kept saying, "I know." At 12:42, while I was still in the passenger seat trying to stop my hands from going numb, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "You need to stop telling people you were born to me. It is not healthy. We have accommodated this confusion long enough." I stared at it, read it again, took a screenshot. Then another text from my father, "Go cool down. We will talk later." I screenshot that too. I started a folder in my phone right there in the Weigel's parking lot. December 25th. Screenshots. That folder would eventually have 87 items in it. I did not know that yet. I only knew two things. My mother had turned Christmas into a public accusation, and she had put it in writing within 90 minutes. Eli said he believed me. He did. But belief is not the same thing as staying. His mother, Laura McCann, was one of those women who sat on 3 nonprofit boards and could make concerns sound like a moral category. 2 days later, on Wednesday evening at 6:16, Eli called me from his truck outside his apartment on Kingston Pike and told me his mother thought the situation was deeper than a family misunderstanding. That was her phrase. He said, "She thinks if there is confusion about who you are and they are saying you lied, maybe I need to step back until it is sorted out." I said, "Do you think I lied about who my own mother is?" Silence. Then he said, "I think your family is saying something very serious." I hung up. Not the breakup kind, the sorting kind. I was starting to understand that once a lie enters a room where people care about their own safety, their jobs, their churches, their children, most of them do not ask whether it is true. They ask whether standing next to you is worth the inconvenience. On Thursday, December 28th, at 9:11 in the morning, my church childcare coordinator, Colleen Barker, left me a voicemail. I still have it. You can hear the copier running in the background and somebody laughing in the hallway. "Brittany, hi, it is Colleen. I need to ask that you step back from nursery rotation until we have clarity on some concerns raised by your family. Please do not report Sunday. We are just being cautious. Clarity on some concerns. That was the first institutional consequence. At 9:24, I emailed back and asked what concerns. At 10:03, she replied that my mother had spoken to Pastor Allen and said there were serious questions about Brittany's identity, mental state, and honesty around children. Those were her exact words because I printed that email on January 3rd at the Powell Branch Library on Emory Road and highlighted each one in yellow. At 11:48 that same morning, my office manager at Smoky Ridge Pediatric Dentistry, Cheryl Dalton, texted and asked if I could come in at 4. No exclamation point, no smiley face, just 4 words and a time. I knew before I got there. The office was in one of those low brick professional buildings with a little fake stone sign out front, and a lobby that always smelled like fluoride varnish and peppermint hand soap. The waiting room fish tank bubbled in the corner. I had spent 14 months there scheduling cleanings, processing insurance claims, alphabetizing school excuse notes, and handing stickers to children with swollen cheeks and brave faces. At 4 o'clock, Cheryl took me into the back consultation room with the frosted glass door. Dr. Neil Patterson was already in there with his arms crossed. Cheryl had printed an email. It was from my mother, subject line, serious concern regarding Brittany Mercer and fabricated personal history. Fabricated personal history. My mother had written that I was not her biological daughter, that I had appropriated the Mercer identity through years of manipulation, that I had presented false information to employers and church staff, and that my emotional instability made me unsafe around minors. She asked them to review whether Brittany's hiring documents contain inaccuracies. She copied the generic office email, Cheryl directly, and Dr. Patterson. My mother signed it with her full name, her church title from the hospitality committee, and her cell phone number. My chest did not tighten. It got quiet. Dr. Patterson said, "We are not making accusations. We are simply uncomfortable until things are clarified." That is what cowards say when they are already acting on the accusation. I said, "My birth certificate says Denise Mercer is my mother." Cheryl would not look at me. "Can you bring us documentation tomorrow?" I said, "Why would I need to prove my birth to keep a front desk job?" Dr. Patterson said, "Because your family has raised concerns." I went home and pulled every paper I could find from the old fireproof box my mother kept in the laundry room closet. That box used to hold Social Security cards, vaccination records, mortgage papers, and old report cards. I say used to because when I opened it that night, my original birth certificate folder was gone. Not lost, gone. My passport card was there. My immunization records from Powell Pediatrics were there. My old ACT score report was there, bent at one corner from when I crammed it in too fast in 2017. But the blue folder with the Knox County certified birth certificate copy was missing. I stood on the laundry room tile in my socks and understood that this had not started on Christmas morning. My mother had prepared. I went back to my room and opened a legal pad. Across the top, I wrote timeline. Under that, I wrote December 25th, 11:17 a.m., Christmas gathering, 32 witnesses. Then I started listing names. That was the night I stopped trying to make emotional sense of it. I started building a file. Now let me take you back to Friday, December 29th, at 7:32 in the morning, sitting cross-legged on my childhood bed with my laptop, a space heater humming by my knees, and the smell of dust burning off the vents because my father always waited too long to turn the heat up. If you have ever had to prove something that should never have needed proving, you know the fury changes shape after the first day. It gets colder, more organized, more useful. I did not call my mother names. I did not pound on their bedroom door. Instead, I made folders, phone screenshots, voicemails, church emails, work texts, witness list, vital records. At 8:10, I ordered a new certified birth certificate from the Knox County Clerk's online portal. $21.50 plus shipping. The confirmation email came at 8:11. I printed it to PDF and saved it. At 8:43, I requested my birth records from St. Anne's Women's Center through the hospital records department. They needed a copy of my ID and a signed release. I uploaded both. The confirmation number was 73146. At 9:15, I called Powell Pediatrics and asked for a complete copy of my childhood patient intake paperwork. The receptionist, a woman named Melissa Trent with a smoker's rasp, and the patience of a kindergarten teacher said they archived old records off-site, but she could request them. I asked specifically for the earliest form with parent information. She said, "Honey, if it exists, I will find it." I wrote her name down. At 10 o'clock, I went to Smoky Ridge and gave Cheryl my social security card, license, and the online order confirmation showing I had requested a new birth certificate because the certified copy had gone missing from my parents' house. She tapped her pink acrylic nails against the desk and said, "We will hold scheduling through next week. Hold scheduling, not fired, not employed, just suspended in a way designed to protect them and isolate me." I asked for a copy of my hiring file. She looked startled and said I could submit the request in writing. So I emailed her from the parking lot at 10:26. Subject line, request for complete personnel file, another PDF in the folder. By then, my father had still not spoken to me in person. He texted twice. The first said, "Your mother is under stress." The second said, "Do not involve outsiders before we talk." That sentence mattered to me because it told me there was something to involve outsiders in. At 11:50 on Friday, I went to New Light Community Church and asked to speak with Pastor Alan Rhodes. The church smelled like copier toner, coffee grounds, and that odd sweet dust old fellowship halls collect. He met me in his office with his Bible open on the desk, not because he had been reading it, but because some people think an open Bible is furniture for authority. He said, "Your mother has shared troubling concerns." I said, "Do you have them in writing?" He hesitated. Some of them I asked him to print them. He did not want to. I stayed seated and waited. Pastor Allen finally handed me 2 pages. One was my mother's email to Colleen Barker. The other was notes Colleen had typed after a phone call from my father on December 26th at 7:20 p.m. The note said, "Mother states Brittany has fabricated biological ties for attention. Father confirms prolonged pattern of instability. Recommendation, remove from nursery until matter is resolved. My father confirms." I looked at those 3 words for a long time. That is how long it took him to erase me. I asked Pastor Allen whether he had independently verified any of this before taking me off the nursery list. He said, "We have to think of the children first." Another coward sentence. I said, "Then think carefully, because you just acted on a lie." He looked embarrassed, but not enough to fix anything that day. On Saturday morning, December 30th, I called my grandmother. Not because I needed comfort, because I needed memory. She was 74, sharp as broken glass, and had the kind of mind that remembered doctors' names from 1999. She said, "Your mother was pregnant." I drove her to 2 prenatal appointments myself, Dr. Langley on Kingston Pike, July 1st and July 29th. She complained the whole time because the waiting room magazines were 6 months old. I asked if she would say that in writing. She said, "Yes." Then there was a pause. And she said something that changed the shape of the story. "Your Aunt Kendra knew your mother meant to do something ugly. She heard her practicing language with your father in the den around Thanksgiving. Kendra thought they were planning to tell you some old family secret in private. She did not know they meant to stand up at Christmas and say it in front of everybody." That was the first silent witness. Kendra had known enough to know danger was coming. She had said nothing. Not because she was cruel, because families train women to call warning a form of disloyalty. I drove to her house in Halls that afternoon. She let me in wearing red socks and a University of Tennessee sweatshirt, and the whole place smelled like chili and fabric softener. She cried before I did, which was inconvenient because I was too angry to comfort anybody. She said, "I am sorry. I heard your mother say once I say it in front of people, she won't be able to keep up the story. I thought she meant something else. I should have called you." I said, "Yes, you should have." She did not defend herself, good for her. Then she told me one more thing. On December 18th, she had stopped by my parents' house to drop off gifts and heard my father ask my mother whether she had pulled the certificate copy from the box. My mother said, "Of course." I asked Kendra to write that down while I was sitting there. She did, dated it, signed it. I took a picture of the page and then put the original in a manila folder. If you have ever been in that phase where pieces of the truth start arriving from people who could have helped earlier but did not, you know it does not feel clean. It is not relief, it is inventory. And I was about to get the first proof that my mother was not just spreading a lie socially, she was using institutions on purpose. On Tuesday, January 2nd at 1:14 in the afternoon, my landlord called. His name was Thomas Breen. He managed a 4-unit brick building on Barnett Way where I had put in an application in November for a 1-bedroom. I had paid a $40 application fee and a $400 hold deposit because a tenant was supposed to move out by mid-January. He said, "Brittany, I'm returning your deposit. Your family reached out with concerns about identity discrepancies on your paperwork. I do not want to rent into a problem." I asked. "Identity discrepancies meaning what exactly?" He exhaled. "Your mother said you were using a family name that is not legally yours." My own mother was now trying to interfere with housing. I asked him to email me that so I would have the refund in writing. He did. Timestamped 1:21 p.m. I still have it. At 2:57 that same day, Cheryl from Smoky Ridge sent another text. Please do not report for your shifts this week. We need to complete an internal review. An internal review of what? My existence, I replied, and asked whether this related to my mother's email. She wrote back, "This is related to concerns raised about the accuracy of your background information and judgment." Judgment. She meant my mother's opinion had entered my payroll file. Wednesday, January 3rd, I drove to the Powell Library at 10 in the morning and printed everything. 15 cents a page, 43 pages total, $6.45. I remember because I had $14 in my checking account until Friday, and I was choosing between printing and gas. There is a kind of humiliation nobody talks about, not the speech kind, the administrative kind, standing at a public printer feeding a machine the documents of your own erasure. I laid the pages out on one of the long oak tables near the local history shelves. Blue form from the landlord, church email, office text, my mother's message, my father's text, timeline, witness list, grandmother statement, Aunt Kendra statement. Then my phone rang with a Knoxville number I did not know. It was St. Anne's medical records. A woman named Terry Halbrook said they had located my birth file, but because the original attending physician had retired and some older delivery logs were stored off-site, the complete packet would take a few more days. She said the abstracted delivery summary was ready. If I wanted, I could pick it up Friday after 3. I asked one question. Does it list the birth mother by name? She said, yes, ma'am, it does. I sat down hard enough to make the chair legs scrape. Friday could not come fast enough. Before Friday came, my mother escalated again. On Thursday, January 4th, at 8:51 in the morning, I got an email from Cheryl with the subject line employment status. The message was short. Due to unresolved concerns regarding honesty and personal background disclosures, Smoky Ridge Pediatric Dentistry is ending your employment effective immediately. Final paycheck will be mailed. I read it once in the parking lot outside the Food City on Clinton Highway. Then again, then I checked the sender line to make sure it was real. I had lost my job because my mother told my employer I had lied about who I was. That was the moment the story stopped being humiliating and became expensive. I had $212 in checking, $109 in savings, a phone bill due on the 9th, car insurance on the 12th, and no apartment now because my landlord had backed out. I sat there with the smell of fryer oil drifting from the store deli and listened to somebody in the next car laugh through their open window. And I thought, very clearly, my mother is trying to make me impossible to place. Not hurt, not embarrassed. Unplaceable. I called Cheryl and asked whether she was willing to put in writing what exact disclosure on my employment paperwork was false. She said, Brittany, we do not want conflict. I said, then do not create it. She did not answer. That afternoon, I sent one email to Cheryl and one to Dr. Patterson asking for the specific document they believed contained inaccurate information. I also asked for the date they first contacted my mother to verify anything about my hiring records. At 5:12, Cheryl replied by mistake on a thread that still included Dr. Patterson. I know it was a mistake because she wrote, Denise said she has photos and church witnesses if needed, but we should not get deeper. I saved that email 6 different ways. Photos and church witnesses, my mother had turned a holiday lie into a campaign. Now let me take you back to Friday, January 5th at 3:21 in the afternoon, inside St. Anne's Women's Center Records office on the 2nd floor, where the air smelled like toner and antiseptic and somebody's microwave tomato soup. Terry Halbrook was in her late 50s, with rimless glasses and a lanyard full of old service pins. She slid a sealed envelope across the counter and asked for my ID again. Her nail polish was chipped pale pink. I remember that because my whole body was so tense I started noticing tiny things to stay upright. Inside the envelope was a delivery summary, maternal admission record, newborn footprint card copy, and a discharge instruction sheet. Maternal name, Denise Renee Mercer. Infant name, Brittany Elaine Mercer. Date of birth, August 14, 1999. Delivering physician, Dr. Gerald Langley, admission by private vehicle, 11:38 p.m., August 13th. Father or support person at admission, Randall Mercer. I just looked at the page, I did not cry. The crying had moved further back in me by then. I asked Terry whether this was standard and whether there was any way to verify authenticity if an employer or church questioned it. She said yes, her department could confirm records directly if sent a release. Then she said, There is also an older labor log note attached because your file had a manual cross-reference. It lists the nurse on shift. The nurse was Colleen Mercer. No relation to me, same last name, different woman. I almost missed it. I asked, "Is she still here?" Terry said, "Retired." "I think she volunteers with patient support sometimes." "Why?" I told her very briefly that my mother had publicly claimed I was not her biological child and had cost me my job. Terry's face changed in that very specific way healthcare workers' faces change when they realize your problem is not administrative anymore. "It is human," she said. "Wait here." 6 minutes later, she came back with a woman in a navy cardigan and silver loafers who looked about 68. Short white hair, straight posture, clear eyes. "Hi, Brittany," she said. "I'm Colleen Mercer. I was on postpartum that weekend. Terry says there is some question about your birth." Question was a small word for what my mother had done, but I nodded. Colleen frowned and said, "I remember your mother because she refused the hospital socks and brought her own. Tiny sunflowers on them. I remember silly things like that. She had a hard labor and your father fainted once when they were taking blood. He came around quickly. Then she said, and your grandmother brought a yellow blanket with white satin trim. I sat there and felt something inside me lock into place. Not hope. Proof Colleen did not know my family. She had nothing to gain. She was just a retired nurse with a memory like polished stone and the hospital behind her. Terry asked if Colleen would be willing to put down what she remembered. Colleen said yes immediately. She sat at the little side desk and wrote a short statement on hospital letterhead with today's date, her full name, former title, and direct contact number. She stated that she had reviewed the delivery summary and personally recalled Denise Mercer as the birth mother admitted on August 13, 1999, delivering female infant Brittany Elaine Mercer on August 14th, and that there was no indication of adoption or custodial transfer. There was no indication of adoption or custodial transfer. That sentence would end my mother's version of events, but I was not done because facts alone do not undo damage. You have to place them where the damage was done. On the drive home, I called my friend Marissa Cole. She is not a lawyer, but she works in HR for a regional insurance company and has a gift for understanding what organizations are most afraid of. We had known each other since community college. She listened without interrupting, then said, "You need 3 things: a clean packet, a written question, and one room where they cannot pretend this is vague. So that is what I built. A clean packet meant the hospital record. Colleen's statement, my grandmother's statement, Kendra's statement, my church removal email, landlord refund email, termination email, and my mother's texts and emails arranged in order with dates on a cover sheet. A written question meant one sentence sent to each institution. Are you confirming that action was taken against me based on a false claim from Denise Mercer that I was not her biological child and had lied about my identity?" One room meant witnesses. On Saturday morning, January 6th, I emailed that exact sentence to Smoky Ridge, New Light Community Church, and Thomas Breen. Thomas replied in 15 minutes that yes, he had relied on information from my mother and was sorry. He offered the apartment back if still available, but by then another applicant had taken it. I thanked him and printed the email. Pastor Allen replied Sunday evening that the nursery suspension had been based in part on my parents' statements and could be revisited upon receipt of clarifying records. I printed that too. Smoky Ridge did not reply, so on Monday, January 8th at 9:08 a.m., I hand-delivered the packet to their office in a white binder with tabs. I wore black slacks and the blue sweater my grandmother said made me look like I know where the money is. The waiting room smelled like bubblegum fluoride and rain on asphalt because the children had tracked in water from the parking lot. Cheryl saw the binder and looked physically tired. I said, "I need a written correction to my termination reason and a copy of any email my mother sent that was placed in my file." Dr. Patterson stepped out from the hallway and said, "This is becoming excessive." I handed him Colleen Mercer's statement and the St. Anne's summary and said, "No, this is becoming documented." The room went quiet. Even the fish tank pump seemed loud. Cheryl took the binder. Dr. Patterson read the first page, then the second. His face did not collapse dramatically the way people imagine in stories. He just lost that soft managerial expression people wear when they believe they are insulated. He said, "We will review this." I said, "Please do it quickly. You fired me over a lie, then I left." That afternoon, my mother called 6 times between 2:19 and 3:07. I let every call go to voicemail in the third one. She said, "You are making this uglier than it needs to be. A good daughter would handle this privately." A good daughter. I had been keeping that folder for 14 days. I did not call back. I requested my full phone records from my carrier online and downloaded the January call log. On Tuesday evening, January 9th, my Aunt Kendra told me there would be a family dinner at my grandmother's house on Easter every year. But because tensions were already exploding, Grandma Evelyn was moving up a meeting for Sunday, January 14th, after church. She said, "She wants this addressed in front of everybody who heard it." I said, "Good." Then Kendra said something else. "Your father does not know I gave you that statement." I said, "He should have given it himself." Silence. Then she said, "Yes. If you have ever waited for a truth to enter the room through somebody other than you know those last days are their own punishment. You start worrying not that you're wrong, but that right will still somehow fail to matter. If this story is touching something in you, please like and subscribe. Stories like this matter because a lot of women know what it is to be perfectly calm and still called unstable by people who need control more than they need honesty. And the meeting at my grandmother's house is where my mother learned that a lie can survive family loyalty, but not paperwork plus an outsider. The days before Sunday were ugly in small ways. My father knocked on my bedroom door Wednesday night at 9:12. He stood in the doorway with one hand in his pocket and the smell of sawdust and peppermint gum on his jacket because he had been in the garage cutting trim pieces for some shelf my mother wanted. He said, "Your mother was trying to address confusion." I said, "By calling my job and my church." He said, "She believed she was protecting people." I looked at him for a full 5 seconds and said, "From me being born?" He did not answer. Then he said, very quietly, "You should not embarrass her in front of your grandmother." That sentence told me everything. Not protect the truth. Protect her. I said, "Get out of my room." He left. The floorboards creaked in that old familiar pattern all the way down the hall. I had known that sound since childhood. It did not mean home anymore. Thursday morning, Cheryl from Smoky Ridge finally replied. She wrote that after reviewing the documentation, the office recognized inconsistencies in information provided by a third party and would amend my file to reflect separation due to staffing changes rather than dishonesty concerns. She offered 2 weeks severance, $1,180 before tax, if I signed a confidentiality and non-disparagement agreement. I laughed when I saw it. Not the happy kind, the insulted kind. They wanted me quiet for $1,180. Marissa read the email and said, "Do not sign. Ask for your file. Ask whether the email was shared beyond management, and ask if they notified anybody else. Keep it boring." So I kept it boring. I wrote back and thanked them for the correction, declined the agreement, and requested a complete copy of all communications about my hiring records or identity concerns, including anything received from Denise Mercer. At 4:36, they sent my personnel file by secure link. My mother's email was in it. So was a note from Cheryl, dated December 28th, that read, "Employee may have fabricated family background." Dr. P concerned due to church reports. Church reports. Not report. Reports multiple. I called Colleen Barker at the church and asked whether she had spoken to Cheryl. Long pause. Then she admitted she had on December 28th at 11:20 a.m. Just in confidence, woman to woman. She said she thought she was helping keep children safe. I said, "You repeated a lie that cost me my job." She started crying. I felt nothing. I asked her to email me exactly what she had told Cheryl. She said she would not put that in writing. So I summarized the call in an email to her and Pastor Allen 5 minutes later and asked them to correct anything inaccurate. Neither corrected it. Silence is its own confirmation. Now let me take you back to Sunday, January 14th at 1:12 in the afternoon at my grandmother Evelyn's house on Dogwood Lane in Fountain City, where the curtains always smelled faintly like starch and the roast in the oven had filled the whole place with onions, thyme, and black pepper. 21 people came. Not all 32 from Christmas, enough. My grandmother had made coffee in the big stainless steel percolator she only used for funerals, graduations, and arguments she intended to win. The dining room table was cleared except for a glass candy dish and a yellow legal pad. My mother was in a forest green sweater set. My father had on the same tan quarter zip he wore to every uncomfortable family event for the last decade. Aunt Kendra sat near the china cabinet. Pastor Allen had been invited, so had Colleen Barker from church. My office manager, Cheryl Dalton, came too, which surprised me until I realized she was probably terrified enough of what this was becoming to want to hear the truth directly. And then at 1:17, Terry Hallbrook from St. Anne's walked in with Colleen Mercer. That was my grandmother's doing. I had not told Grandma to invite them. I had only told her who had helped me. Grandma called St. Anne's herself on Friday, asked for Terry, and said, "If my daughter has made a public mess of my granddaughter's birth, I would appreciate a witness with good posture and no patience for nonsense." Terry later told me that line was the reason she agreed to come on her day off. Some women save you by being old enough not to fear anybody. The room settled. Coffee cups touched saucers. My uncle turned off the football pregame in the den. My mother sat with both hands folded in her lap like she was attending an insurance seminar. Grandma Evelyn said Denise made a statement at Christmas that has damaged Brittany's work, church standing, and housing. We are going to address it once. My mother inhaled through her nose and said, "I was trying to speak honestly." Grandma did not even look at her. Terry. Terry Halbrook opened a manila folder and took out one page. Her voice was clear and ordinary, the way people sound when they do not know they are detonating somebody else's lie. I am with medical records at St. Anne's Women's Center. I reviewed the archived file for Brittany Elaine Mercer, date of birth August 14, 1999. The maternal admission and delivery summary identified Denise Renee Mercer as birth mother, admitted on August 13th at 11:38 p.m. There is no record of adoption, transfer, or any discrepancy regarding parentage. Then Colleen Mercer spoke. "I was the nurse on shift that weekend. I remember Denise Mercer. I remember Randall Mercer fainting during a blood draw. I remember the grandmother bringing a yellow blanket. Brittany was born to Denise at St. Anne's on August 14th. That is what happened." Silence. Not movie silence, real silence. Somebody swallowing, the heater clicking, one child in the den asking if he could have another roll and being shushed immediately. My mother blinked once and said, "That is not what I was told." Broken sentence, nothing else. Grandma Evelyn turned to her slowly. "By whom?" My mother did not answer, so Grandma picked up another page. It was Aunt Kendra's statement. She read the line about hearing my father ask whether my mother had pulled the certificate copy from the box. Then she read my mother's December 25th text to me aloud. "You need to stop telling people you were born to me. It is not healthy." Then Pastor Allen, to his credit, finally did one useful thing. He said, "Denise, you also told the church Brittany was unstable around children because of this alleged deception. Was that based on any record?" My mother looked at him like she could not believe he had crossed the line from soft ally to public witness. "No," she said. One syllable. Cheryl Dalton then asked the question that mattered most to me. "Did you send this same claim to my office knowing it could affect her employment?" My mother said, "I believed people should be informed." Cheryl's face went gray. That was the room where everybody understood what she had done, not just humiliated me, interfered, called institutions, used the language of safety and stability to make lies travel faster. I did not give a speech. I did not need one. Grandma Evelyn did. She took off her reading glasses, set them on the legal pad, and said to my parents, "You will both leave this house in 10 minutes. Denise, you are no longer handling meals, nursery gifts, or volunteer scheduling at church under my name or with my money. Randall, do not come asking me to smooth this over. Brittany will be paid back for every lost dollar you two caused where it can be counted, and where it cannot, you will live with it." Then she turned to Cheryl and Pastor Allen. "Both of you acted without checking. Fix what you can." That room had more authority than any courtroom I could have afforded. After that, consequences started arriving in the plain, unglamorous ways real consequences do. On Tuesday, January 16th, New Light Community Church sent me a written apology and restored my volunteer standing. Colleen Barker was removed as childcare coordinator effective February 1st. They called it a restructuring in the congregational email, but Pastor Allen told me privately that the board had decided she could not continue after spreading unverified personal accusations about a volunteer. On Thursday, January 18th, Smoky Ridge sent me a revised termination letter stating my separation had been due to staffing changes. They also mailed a check for $1,180 plus an additional $643 for administrative error resulting in lost wages during review. I never signed their agreement. I cashed the check anyway. On Monday, January 22nd, Thomas Breen called and told me a different unit had opened in his building because a tenant's transfer fell through. Rent was $875 a month. He waived the second application fee because, as he put it, I got used as a weapon in something ugly. I moved in on February 3rd with 2 borrowed lamps, 1 thrifted bookshelf, and every document in a plastic file bin on the front seat of my car. And my parents paid a more public price, too. My mother had a paid part-time job coordinating childcare check-in for a Mother's Day Out program at Little Pines Learning Center on Cedar Lane. It was not a huge salary, $14 an hour, 22 hours a week. But she loved the authority of name tags, sign-in sheets, and deciding which volunteers were appropriate. After the church meeting, one of the Little Pines board members, who was also my cousin Haley's piano teacher, asked questions. By the first week of February, Denise Mercer was let go. The director told my Aunt Kendra it was because Denise had used false child safety concerns against her own daughter and the board no longer trusted her judgment. My father lost his seat on the church benevolence committee in March. Quietly, no announcement, just not reappointed. And then there was the money. Grandma Evelyn followed through. She sat with a yellow notepad and helped me total what my parents' lie had cost me between December 25th and February 3rd. Lost shifts before termination, $612. Lost job gap before my next position started, $2,480. Apartment hold deposit lost the first time, 400 replacement birth records, printing gas trips, certified mail, $138.70. Total $3,630.70. On February 10th, Grandma handed my parents a copy of the list at her kitchen table and said, "You will repay Brittany by the end of March." My father wrote the check on March 28th, $3,630.70. His handwriting was shaky on the cents line. I deposited it at the First Horizon branch on Broadway and took a photo of the receipt in my car. Concrete, countable, real. If you have ever waited for someone to finally face the exact cost of what they did, you know the number matters. It does not heal you. It just proves the damage was not imaginary. Now let me take you back one more time to Easter Sunday, March 31st, 2024, because that is where the story settled into the shape it still has now. I went to my grandmother's house again, not because I felt festive, because I wanted to see whether truth would hold once the season had changed. The house smelled like ham glaze and coffee. The same silverware drawer still stuck. The same den TV murmured too loud. My mother came in 23 minutes late with a store-bought pie and the expression of a woman who had rehearsed dignity in the car. People greeted her politely, nothing more. No one asked her to organize plates. No one asked her to take the children downstairs. No one handed her a sign-in sheet. That had been her favorite part of any gathering, being the one who assigned people. She sat at the far end of the table and said almost nothing. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Eastgate Pediatric Dental in Oak Ridge. I had interviewed there the previous week. They offered me the patient coordinator position at $19 an hour, full-time, benefits after 60 days. Start date, April 15th. I did not announce it. I showed my grandmother first. She squeezed my wrist and smiled into her iced tea. Later, as people were getting coats, my mother finally came near me in the hallway by the grandfather clock. The house smelled like wool coats and dish soap from the kitchen, she said. I did not intend for all of this. I believe that. Not because she was innocent, because people like her never intend the whole bill. They intend the injury and expect somebody else to absorb the cost. I said, "You intended enough." She opened her mouth, then closed it. One broken inhale. That was all. I moved past her and picked up my keys. I wish I could tell you that winning made it clean. It did not. I got my records, I got my check, I got a better job. My mother lost hers, my father lost his committee seat. The church had to correct itself in writing. The office changed my file. People who watched me be humiliated on Christmas morning had to sit in a dining room in January and hear 2 outsiders state the truth like weather. But none of that gives me back the second after she said it. None of that gives me back Eli, who never called after his mother's advice won. None of that gives me back the easy way I used to hear the word family without checking where the exits were. None of that makes my father less of a man who chose quiet over his own daughter. I still talk to my grandmother. I still see Aunt Kendra sometimes. I speak to my parents twice a year, usually by text, always briefly. I do not call them mom and dad when I'm tired anymore. I use their names in my phone. Denise, Randall. Maybe that sounds cold. It probably is, but cold kept me alive in this story. Cold made the folders. Cold printed the emails. Cold sat in the records office and listened to a retired nurse say what happened on the night I was born. Cold is how I learned that when somebody tries to erase you in public, you do not have to match their volume. You just have to bring the right paper into the right room and let somebody with no reason to lie read it out loud. That part, at least,